So let's go ahead and let's begin. Welcome to the Merit System Examinations and Eligible List webinar. This is a presentation of the New York State and CSEA Partnership for Education and Training. My name is Eddie Encarnacion, and I'll be your host for our webinar. Our instructor for today's webinar will be Matt Garapi. Matt Garapi works at the Career Mobility Office that is within the Department of Civil Service. At this point, I want to point out that everyone has been muted to keep background noise to a minimum. If you have a question, you can click on the Raise Hand button, which you can find at the bottom of the screen. It is an icon with a hand in the air. I want you to go ahead and give it a try now. Please click on the Raise Hand button. Great. As you can see, a hand pops up next to your name. Now, let's go ahead and lower your hands by clicking on the Raise Hand button again. Excellent. You can also type any questions or comments you may have in the chat box. You can find the chat panel at the right-hand side of the screen. If the chat box isn't open, please click on the chat button at the bottom right. Once chat is open, make sure that everyone is selected in the Send To area. Type your thoughts in the box below it, and then press Enter when you are done. As I mentioned previously, today's webinar is sponsored by the New York State and CSEA Partnership for Education and Training, or as many people call it, Partnership. Some of you may be wondering, what is the partnership exactly? Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, the Partnership is an organization that administers education and training programs for CSEA represented employees through labor management cooperation. It is funded through negotiated agreements between New York State and CSEA. The Partnership offers in-person classroom training, online learning, educational advisement services, grants, tuition benefits, labor management services, and other education and training programs, including the webinar you are attending today. The Partnership is a joint labor management organization whose mission is to promote career mobility, improve job skills, support workplace safety and health, and encourage effective labor management relations. You can learn more about us on our website or by calling us directly. I'll provide our contact information again at the end of today's webinar. Now that we all know a little bit more about the Partnership, let's get started. I'd like to turn the presentation over to your instructor, Matt Garapi.
Thanks, Eddie. Can you hear me all right, Eddie? Is the audio fine?
Audio is loud and clear.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Eddie. And welcome to today's webinar called Merit System Examinations and Eligibility Lists. My name is Matthew Garapi, and I work in the Career Mobility Office that is located within the Department of Civil Service. So the Career Mobility Office takes policy direction and program administration from the Office of Employee Relations and the Department of Civil Service. Our office was created because of the union's interest in educating their members on the merit system and providing them with information and resources on their mobility options within the merit system. So this webinar, within the webinar, we will use a lot of civil service terminology in order to discuss examinations and the eligible lists. Some of this terminology you may already know, while some of it may be new to you. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to use the raised hand icon or the chat feature. We've also included definitions of these terms in your handouts. Now today, we'll be discussing the types of examinations, types of eligible lists, the effects of appointments or declinations on eligible lists, and the Eligible List Management System, also known as ELMS, E-L-M-S is the acronym.
If you haven't printed out your handouts for this course already, you can do so after the webinar by going back to your webinar email invitation. The handouts would have been included as an attachment to that email.
Now, going through some of this information, it may generate some additional questions about your own specific eligibility and salary. There are some topics that we won't be able to address during this webinar. The first one is individual questions pertaining to your exam history or your career interests. We find that everybody's situation is different, so we welcome you to contact our office where we can individually discuss your personal question in more precise detail. Our contact information will be located at the end of this presentation. And we're also not able to discuss questions related to salary. Salary determinations are made by the hiring agency and the Office of the State Comptroller. Therefore, if you ever have any questions about your salary, you're going to want to contact your hiring agency. Contact information for the various agency human resource offices can be found at the phone directory link shown at the bottom of your screen. So, we're going to go ahead and talk about how civil service positions are filled. When you're hired, or what we refer to in civil service as receiving an appointment, it must be done according to the principles of merit and fitness as mandated by the New York State Constitution. This is the examination process. The examination assesses a candidate's knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary for performing the job. Approximately 80% of civil service positions in the executive branch of government are filled through an examination. Those that are tested for and filled from a resulting eligible list are in the competitive jurisdictional class. For the purposes of this webinar, we're going to be focusing on these competitive types of positions. Now, if you have any questions about the position that you are in, please feel free to contact the Career Mobility Office, and we can look up your work history and offer some additional guidance. Now, before we go through the various types of exams and such, we have a question for you. How many of you have taken a competitive exam for your current position?
If you have taken a competitive exam for your current position, please click on the Raise Hand button. Again, this button can be found at the bottom of your screen next to the reactions or the smiley face button.
Let's see.
And Matt, I see a few hands up in the air.
Goodness gracious, yeah, look at that.
Wow.
I mean, that's a good thing. You know, you think with 80% of the jobs being competitive, there should be a good bulk of hands. Oh, very good. Okay. Very good. Yeah, no, definitely good to see that, because that's kind of how the system is designed. Try to get most people in through the competitive process. But there will definitely be those that don't, come in necessarily through the competitive process, and so candidates may have received an appointment through another mechanism and didn't take an exam. Now, if this is you and you have questions regarding your options and your current status, give our office a call. And if you haven't taken an exam, don't worry. This webinar will be helpful because it'll provide an understanding of the exam process, which will assist you in your career at one point or another. So let's take a look at exams a little bit more in depth. There are different types of examinations, such as open competitive, promotion, and transition. The open competitive examinations are open to anyone who has the minimum qualifications that are listed on that exam announcement. State employees are also eligible to take open competitive exams if they meet those minimum qualifications. Then we have promotion exams, and promotion exams are open to permanently appointed state employees. Now, there are two types of promotion exams, departmental and interdepartmental. Departmental promotion exams are for titles used only in a particular agency and may only be open to that agency's employees. Now, an interdepartmental promotion exam are for those titles that are used by multiple agencies. Employees at various agencies may be eligible to take these different types of exams. Now, a transition exam is also open to those that are permanently appointed to the state, so permanently appointed state employees. They are used to allow state employees to transition, in quotes, from one career to another. So sometimes it's not always clear the type of exam you should take, but before we go further, we have another question for you. If you are interested in a title that has both an open competitive exam and a transition exam. Which one should you take?
I'd like you to notice that I've opened a new panel on the right-hand side of the screen. Please take your mouse and click on the option A, B, C, or D that you feel is the best answer. When you are done, please click on Send. Okay, Matt, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give folks some time to submit their votes. Let me just take a look at the chat real quick. I see.
Yep. I've seen some people say both. Yeah.
Some people are saying both. Let me go ahead and go to the Slido panel.
Yep. Same thing on the Slido panel. Very good. We got a lot of people saying both. A lot of people saying both.
Okay, and it looks like the majority have spoken, and they are saying B. If you meet the minimum qualifications for both, apply for both.
And so as a result, that is correct. You know, if you guys have the opportunity, if you folks here have an opportunity that you qualify for two different types of exams, you should definitely, it's kind of like that concept of when you're going job hunting, throwing your hats in multiple rings. It's kind of like that. Make sure, you know, the more you apply to more exams, the more chances to get appointed off of lists. So it's just, in our personal opinion, it's a no-brainer. You know, if you apply for multiple, take them, because with 80% of the jobs being in the competitive class, it's going to obviously help you out in more ways than one. So
now,
I'm going to let you, oh, sorry, Hetty. I'm about to take your spot again.
No worries. Before we move on, I'd like you to notice that the polling panel has closed the chat and participants panels. To reopen them, at the top right, find the word participants, click on that arrow next to it, and reopen it. Click on the arrow next to the word chat to do the same thing. If the participants panel isn't open, you won't be able to raise your hand. If the chat panel isn't open, you won't be able to share your ideas with us there. So please, we'd like you to reopen them.
I see one of the participants wasn't able to see any Slido options, so I don't know if we can have our IT back up here, maybe message her directly and try to help out. Just wanted to make note of that.
Yeah, it could be some agencies restrict Slido from opening. So
oh, didn't know that. Interesting. Sorry, just taking a sip of coffee. Now that you guys know that you can apply for any exam for which you qualify for, let's take a look at an example of an exam announcement. Each examination will have an announcement for a specific job title and will provide information on the minimum qualifications necessary to take the exam. So on your screen, we've included a snapshot of a portion of an exam announcement. So we want you to point out specific components on the exam announcement that will help you to determine your eligibility. You'll respond using the chat box.
For each of the following questions, please type in the chat box. You can find the chat panel again on the right-hand side of the screen. Right? Make sure that everyone is selected in the Send To area, type your thoughts, and then press Enter.
Okay. Wonderful. So, remember how we talked about the different types, open competitive, promotion, transition, and then with promotion, we had two different types. First, I'd like you to tell us what type of promotion exam is shown.
All right, everyone, using the chat feature, go ahead and let us know what type of promotion exam is being shown.
What type of promotional exam is being shown?
All right, so I have a few people are saying interdepartmental promotion. We have a couple are saying office assistant 2. A lot of interdepartmental. All right, all great responses, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for participating.
I'm glad that we have a mixture here, because what you're really looking for when you're looking at this is the top of the exam announcement. So you see right up at the tippity top, it says Interdepartmental Promotion Examination open to all qualified employees of New York State. So this is an exam that's open to those state employees who qualify. right? So just wanted to make sure that we're able to spot that. So interdepartmental promotion examination, usually the type of exam is listed right at the top. All right, so we're going to try another one, okay? Now, what is the exam title? There could be multiple.
Again, everyone, type in the chat, what is the exam title?
Mm-hmm. Could be multiple.
Okay, we're getting a lot of office assistant too.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, so looks like everyone is saying office assistant too.
Now, what's excellent about this differentiation is everybody's right, but there's varying levels of how correct we are. Everybody's mentioning, at least at the bare minimum, Office Assistant 2. And that's correct, and that's good to find. We want to focus on the fact that the Office Assistant 2 title is out. But remember that for some folks who are looking for the promotion, the minimum qualifications may be slightly different for each title depending on which one you're going into. So as a result, yes, Office Assistant 2 is one of those exam titles, but we also have the other exam titles as well here, like Office Assistant 2 Spanish Language, Office Assistant 2 Calculations, et cetera, et cetera. So those who said just OA2, you're still correct, because at the end of the day, you're looking at the OA2 series of titles, right? OA2, OA2 Calc, OA2 Customer Service, blah, blah, blah. But remember that when you're looking at exam titles, you want to make sure that you see which title is associated with which exam. So, for example, 37-454 here in this example is related to Office Assistant 2, but 37-458 is Office Assistant 2 Customer Service. So it's very important to see that exam title there towards the bottom. Eddie, if you can kind of throw the arrow towards the exam number and exam title a little bit lower, there, right at the top. Yep. So right there, exam title. All right, last one. This time, I want you to tell me who can apply for this exam. And I'm going to give you a little hint. It's back up towards the top of the screen. Who can apply for this exam?
Go ahead and share your thoughts in the chat.
It's right on the announcement. Brings a wonderful tear to my eye. All right, I think they get it. I'll cut it off there. When you see the same thing multiple times, you're like, okay, well, we're good. They got it. It is all qualified employees of New York State, precisely. We're going to get a little bit more into that in just a moment. So let's go ahead and move it over to the next part of the slide. So that was a great job. I thought we all just jumped on all qualified employees right there. Here's what we're looking for if you couldn't find one of the sections. So as you can see, there's a lot of important information listed on an exam announcement. And we also want to remind you, as I just mentioned with the OA1 and how you were looking for one specific title, one list sometimes can fill multiple titles. So an example of this could be the beginning office assistant or the PCO, or the acronym of, the Professional Career Opportunities Exam, or using the acronym for beginning office assistant, the BOA. So just make sure to carefully read each exam announcement to make sure that you're qualified to apply and which titles you may be considered for. Very important to read that information, and we're going to go more into that right now. Here is another snapshot of that exam announcement. This screen shows the minimum qualifications to apply for and take the test. The minimum qualifications will also identify specifically the employees from what agencies can apply. Sometimes the qualifications to take the exam will be different from the qualifications to be appointed to the position, as in the example on your screen. So look at the top, you'll see it says, you must be a qualified employee of New York State and have had 3 months of service. But then when you go down to the bottom where it says to be appointed to the position, it says after 1 year of service. So for this example, the candidate will need to have 3 months of experience in one of the titles listed, and it's important to note that it states permanent service. This does not include temporary or provisional service. Furthermore, to be appointed to the position, the candidate will need to have 1 year of service as described in the minimum qualifications to be appointed from the eligible list. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that qualifying experience for appointment from the eligible list later in the presentation. So we have another question for you. Looking at these minimum qualifications, can employees from the Department of Transportation, the Department of Labor, and the Department of Motor Vehicles apply for this exam?
I'd like you to notice that I've opened the Slido panel again, which you can find on the right-hand side of the screen. Take your mouse and click on the option A for yes or B for no that you feel is the best answer. When you are done, please click on Send. Okay, and let's take a look at some of the votes that are coming in. Right now I'm looking in the chat. I have a couple of yes and I have a no. If we look at the Slido, right now we have 13 votes in.
And a couple of chats too as well, so I think we should be good to go.
And the majority, 92% in the Slido panels are saying A, yes.
So the answer is yes. And now let me get a little more specific as to why. You'll see under the minimum qualifications that it says you must be a qualified employee of New York State, right? Now, some interdepartmental exams are only open to certain agencies. So it'll be like 2 or 3 agencies wherever the title is filled. But for this particular example, everyone in a qualifying title, regardless of their agency, can take this exam. So think about it like which agencies use which title. OA1, OA2, you know, that's pretty ubiquitous, right? Like most agencies have OA1 and OA2. I'd say darn near all of them. You know, so it would be kind of a bear on the exam announcement if we said open to this department, this department, this department, this department. So it's much easier for us to say, hey, all agencies can, all titles, all agencies, you know, can use kind of this exam list, so to speak. So anyway. Moving on. All right, so here's a final screenshot of the exam announcement. This is a portion of the exam announcement that tells you what type of test will be given. So if you look right up there towards the top, it says there will be a written test. So, for example, we have a couple of different types, written, oral, or training and experience. This will include the subject areas that will be tested for to determine that you have the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed for the title. Now, if there is a test guide available for an examination, it will be referenced on the exam announcement. Civil Service does also have a general guide to written tests, which is available on our website or at the link on your screen. And also, by the way, a copy of the guide has been provided to you in your handouts. So let's review some key points about the examinations. Examinations are announced on the Civil Service website. So on the screen, we've included a link to this website. Now, you may want to sign up for email notification. I personally recommend this very much, very, very much, so that you can receive examination announcements electronically. On your screen, we have included the link where you can subscribe for email notification. And once you submit your email address, you'll receive an email to confirm the subscription. You will be emailed every time new exams are announced. So that's open competitive or transition or promotion, all of them. Once you have found an announcement in which you are interested, review the minimum qualifications to see if you qualify. You may apply online if available or download the announcement and appropriate application. After you apply online, you will receive a confirmation email to verify that your application was submitted. You should receive this confirmation email immediately upon submission. If you do not receive this confirmation, your application did not go through, and you will need to submit it again. just to be clear. If your application was disapproved, you'll receive a disqualification notice. Otherwise, if your application was approved, you'll receive an admission notice about 1 week before the scheduled test date. If you have questions regarding your disqualification or admission, call the phone number listed on the disqualification notice or on the exam announcement. Finally, exams are scheduled as needed and are based on recruitment needs. While all examinations are announced on the Department of Civil Service website, that does not mean that the Civil Service administers all of the tests. We'll get into this a little bit more in a moment. So far, everyone doing well? Do we have any additional questions? We also will have a Q&A period at the end of the presentation where I can sit down and kind of speak a little bit more directly to each person's question. But if you have any quick ones about the exam announcement, I'd love to answer them.
So if you do have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat. I'll give you a few seconds to go ahead and enter your question in the chat. But as Matt mentioned, we will have a Q&A session at the end of our webinar. So if you want, you can also hold off questions for the Q&A session. And Matt, I don't see any questions at this time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wonderful. Well, if anybody's shy or anything, or they want to wait, definitely feel free to ask. I would like to use my wealth of knowledge to, certainly answer some questions for folks. All right. Well, we'll move on and maybe answer some questions at the end. So, as we mentioned, the Department of Civil Service does not administer all examinations. Some exams and lists are administered by the hiring agency. This is important for you to know so that you understand where to apply and who to contact with questions about your application or eligibility. The exam announcement itself will tell you where you'll need to apply for the test. For example, it may say to apply to a particular agency or facility, or directly to civil service. Wherever you apply is where you should direct any questions about testing, scheduling, or if you are disqualified. If you're not sure who to contact, you can call employment records within civil service and they will direct you to the appropriate person. Their contact information has been included on your screen. All right, so let's say you've taken the test and you're on an eligible list. One thing we want to address is some possible restrictions before you are appointed off of the list. So this is for some titles. Some titles require that you pass a physical medical exam or a background check before you're appointed, and others have a proficiency test to demonstrate that you have a particular skill, think like language proficiencies and such. Any restriction will need to be addressed before you are permanently appointed. And also, remember when we showed you the exam announcement and there were different qualifications shown to take the test versus being appointed from the list? You may be restricted from appointment until you have the appropriate amount of time in your qualifying title. Now, this is known as an eligibility date. We'll show you this when we visit the Eligible List Management System, also known as ELMS, or ELMS. So, one question that we often receive is, what locations or areas will I be considered for once I'm actually on the eligible list? Generally, the salary grade listed on the exam announcement will determine where you will be considered. And in a moment, we'll show you how the state is broken down into locations or areas you will be considered for. Generally, if your name appears on a list for a title that is a salary grade 18 or below, you will be considered for an area based on your zip code. Generally, for salary grade 19 and above, you'll be considered statewide. But you can always change your location preferences, and we'll show you how to in a minute. You'll need to keep in mind that just because you update any geographical preferences on one eligible list, this update will not carry through to all of the eligible lists that you are on. You're going to need to update each list separately. And again, this is general information. So if you have any questions on the locations you'll be considered for, you can contact employment records within civil service or the hiring agency themselves. So, in front of you is just a general map of how the areas of the state are separated. The box below the map specifically defines the counties that exist within each area. A copy of this map and the areas has been provided to you in your handouts. So, we have a question for you based on what we just covered. Let's say you live in Buffalo, which is in Erie County, Western New York, and you are on the eligible list for a program aide position. Now, this is a salary grade 13 position. Which area or areas would you be automatically considered for? Look at the map on your screen and select your answer once the polling questions appear.
I'd like you to notice that I've opened the Slido panel, which you can find on the right-hand side of the screen. Take your mouse and click on the option A, B, C, or D that you feel is the best answer. When you are done, please click on Send. Okay, let's take a look. We have 7 votes in so far. I'll give folks a few more seconds to submit their votes. All right, I'll give it 10 more seconds. We're at 9 votes.
Some people might have to go to the apps screen at the bottom of their WebEx and click on the apps, then click on Slido. I know that's another thing for those who can't find the voting panel. Correct.
Usually when the chat panel opens, it closes the Slido panel, so it would be the icon to the left of the participants icon at the bottom. Maybe that'll work for you. Okay, and I'm going to stop the voting, and it looks like the majority with 93% said A, Area 5.
Okay. And with that being said, A is the correct answer. Just want to kind of briefly go over what we just discussed. So, you know, we're talking about a salary grade 13 title. And from the previous slide, we said that any title with a salary grade 18 and below, the candidate would be on the list for an area based on their zip code. So if they're in Erie County, which you see is in Western New York, and that's Area 5, the answer is A, Area 5. So just want to kind of point that out and such. So, with that being said, now we're going to take a look at, now we're going to take a look at how agencies must use the lists in question. This is called an order of certification. And at this point, I want to clarify the meaning of the term certified list. So when an agency has a vacancy and they review the eligible list, so the list of all the people who took the exam, the agency will order a certified list from civil service based on the specifics of the position they're looking to fill. So, for example, when I say specifics, I mean if the position is permanent or if it's temporary, if it's full-time or if it's part-time, if it's a shift position or if there's no shift regarding the position. And when we say shift and non-shift, shift means like you're working an off shift, like nighttime, weekend, something like that. And then non-shift is just like a typical 8 to 4, 9 to 5 kind of thing. Once agencies get that certified list, they must use it in the following order. So first, the agency's promotion list must be used. Then the interdepartmental promotion list. Then the agency has the choice of using the transition or the open competitive list. So the agency uses their department promotion eligible list first. So I'll give you an example. So if the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision is looking to fill a food service worker 2 position, again, food service worker 2, they will first look at their own employees on their agency promotion list first. And then after they've gone through that list, they will then look at the interdepartmental promotion list, which is made up of all the other agency's employees on the food service worker 2 list. Then finally, the agency can fill the position through either the transition list or the open competitive list, depending on which one is available. It is the agency's choice on which of those lists that they use, the open competitive or transition. However, the agencies must use a promotion list before using a transition or open competitive list. It's important to be aware of an additional type of list. these are called reemployment lists, such as preferred lists, reemployment rosters, agency reduction transfer lists that may be in place for a specific title in a specific area. These lists contain the names of employees that were displaced from their position through a closure, consolidation, or reduction in force. So these mandatory lists may supersede any of the eligible lists notated above. So does anybody have any questions about that?
If you have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat box. I will give you a few seconds to
It's a lot of information.
Any questions that you may have. And like we said earlier, we will have that Q&A session at the end. So go ahead, if you have a question, type it in the chat now. If not, you can wait until the Q&A session at the end.
Yep.
Matt, I'll give them a few more seconds.
Give them a few seconds. Somebody might be in the middle of typing or something. Absolutely. Absolutely. Lists can certainly be a confusing topic. When I was an HR Spec 1 here at Civil Service, I literally, it's a confusing topic, you know. Even civil service employees need to remind themselves of the resources and such, you know, oh, this list, that type of thing, kind of deal.
All right, so a question did come up. Jennifer asked, what if the title exists but the exam does not?
That's an interesting question, and I'm going to have to touch it very briefly. We can talk a little bit more about it at the end of the presentation or have you contact CMO, because there's a lot of instances where a title exists but an exam does not. So if there's a non-competitive title, that's a title that Civil Service has noted we cannot test for one reason or another. That would be an example of a title existing but an exam does not. Same thing with the other jurisdictional classes of labor and exempt. With exempt, you're serving at the will of the governor, so that's kind of like people who work with like commissioners or in other offices and such. That's a very, very, very small population of civil service positions. But one you might be more familiar with is the labor class. So those are positions where the title exists of, you know, cleaner, parking attendant, stuff like that, but there's no exam for the title. Jennifer, if you're referring to a competitive position, that would be a more broader explanation regarding like exam planning. You know, maybe they're either planning the exam to come out or something to that effect that would need to be addressed on a more individual basis. But if it's something regarding a different jurisdictional class, that's the reason. There are no exams for non-competitive class positions, exempt or labor class positions. So that could be a reason why a title exists, but an exam does not.
That was a good question, Jennifer.
No, thank you. That was a very good question. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. Again, if that explanation or you had a question but you didn't quite type it out in time or something, I'm more than willing to answer that question at the end of the presentation. But until then, we will move on. All right, so sometimes when an agency is using a promotion list, they have to consider candidates based on their qualifying title. So this is referred to as an A list and a B list. If an examination has an A list and a B list, then the A minimum qualifications are generally the lower level direct line titles. And the B list are other minimum qualifications for similar titles. So A candidates will be considered before B candidates. By the way, if this is confusing, and trust me, this was one of the things that confused me when I was in civil service, we have a good example coming up. A candidates will be considered before the B candidates. If you're on the B list, the agency must have less than 3 A-list candidates willing to accept an appointment before they can consider the B candidates. And any remaining A-list candidates are interfiled among the B-list candidates. So let's use that in an example for folks. So here's a portion of an exam announcement. I'm going to read through it, and then we're going to have some questions for you to answer based on what's in front of you. So this is a promotion exam offered to employees within the Office of the State Comptroller. This exam announcement is for the title of Payroll Specialist 2. There are A and B, minimum qualifications for this exam. Notice that the A minimum qualification is service in the lower level direct line title. So for this example, it's 3 months of permanent competitive or 55 BC service as a payroll specialist 1. The B minimum qualifications is service in a comparable title, or titles rather. So for this example, it's 3 months of permanent competitive experience, or permanent competitive or 55 BC service as an accountant aide, program aide, or employee retirement system examiner 2. Okay, so take a look at this information in front of you. Based on this information, here's our first question. Would a program aide from the Department of Transportation be able to apply for this exam?
Okay, I went ahead and I opened the Slido panel, which you can find on the right-hand side of the screen. Take your mouse and click on the option A for yes or B for no. And then when you're done, click on send.
Goodness gracious me. It's split.
And if you're having issues with Slido, you can go ahead and you can type A for yes or B for no in the chat. All right. I will give it a few more seconds. And Matt, it's split.
It is split.
53% are saying B, no.
Okay. For those that said yes, I want to point you to the top of this minimum qualification. The answer is no, because promotion examination offered to the employees within the Office of the State Comptroller. See that there? So, because this is only offered to the employees within the Office of the State Comptroller, a program aide could apply if they were an employee of the Office of the State Comptroller. I hope that makes sense. With that being said, we'll jump to the next one. Let's say the person is, within the Office of State Comptroller. We've established that. Would an Employee Retirement System Examiner 1 qualify to take this examination?
All right, I've opened the Slido panel for our second question. Go ahead and click on the option A for yes or B for no that you feel is the best answer. When you are done, click on send.
I enjoy that people call it a trick question, because to kind of, while people are doing the polling, Eddie, I want to make note of this. As a staffing representative, we get those applications and such, and we do frequently get people who will apply for a position outside of their agency, and they'll be like, well, I thought I qualified. I may be in the title or a similar title. And then when we direct them to the exam announcement, it is there in black and white, but it gets tricky because of that departmental and interdepartmental function with promotion exams. So yes, it's considered a trick question because it's asking you to focus on where are you at and what type of promotion exam it is, which is, again, we keep saying, read the exam announcement, read the exam announcement, read the exam announcement, and that's the reason why we're like a broken record with that, because really, if you just read the minimum qualifications bit, that usually answers at least a decent amount of questions if you qualify. So I just wanted to point that out.
All right, but it looks like 100% of the folks on this webinar are saying B, no.
We might not know about departmental or interdepartmental, but we know our numbers. Yes, that is true. A Employee Retirement System Examiner 1 certainly cannot apply for this. It's not a listed title, so you guys caught on to that very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. So the final question. Okay. A program aide from the Office of the State Comptroller. So a program aide from the Office of the State Comptroller takes this test. Will they appear on the B list?
Okay, I've opened the Slido panel for this question. Using your mouse, click on A for yes or B for no that you feel is the best answer. And when you are done, click on Send. All right, and it looks like the majority of folks have spoken, and they are saying, 93% are saying A, yes.
This is correct. So the title is within the state comptroller's office. And then when you look at the minimum qualifications, that title is on the B list. So when all is said and done and they're thrown on the list, they are going to be on the B list. Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead and show you what the A and B list looks like on an eligible list. So just want to show you a quick snapshot from ELMS showing the current payroll specialist to eligible list. The resulting eligible list with the A and B candidates will look a little something like this. So notice the area that's highlighted in purple. The A list will need to be considered first, and then the B list will be used after the A list portion of this list is exhausted. So bear in mind that agencies use lists in score order according to the rule of 3. That means they start by considering the top 3 people on the list, but they also consider anyone else that is at the 3rd person score. So as candidates decline or are appointed, the agency may consider candidates with lower scores using the same rule of 3. Now, what happens if you're on an eligible list and something changes? Well, we'll go over that. I'll give you the most basic example. People take a different job. If you sign up for an exam or if you take the test and then go to another agency, your name may or may not be on your new agency's list. So if you change agencies, titles, or if you complete probation, you're going to want to review the form S211.1, so S211.1, to see if you need to make any changes. And we have included the link to the form on your screen. We've also included a copy of the form in your handouts. So, if you're on an eligible list and your score is reachable in a specific area the agency is trying to fill with a vacancy, you may receive a Canvas letter. Read the Canvas letter carefully and indicate your response. The Canvas letter will provide a lot of information on the position. Remember that a Canvas letter is just inquiring if you're interested in the position. It is not a job offer. The Canvas letter will have multiple responses to choose from. And on your screen, we have identified the responses that will have an effect on being canvassed for future positions. These are declining a position, not replying to a Canvas letter at all, failing to report to an interview, and noting that that location is unacceptable. Also, if you are permanently hired, your name will be inactivated from the list for that title. If you do not want to be considered for the position at the time you are canvassed, you may want to choose the option on the Canvas letter that states, "Please do not consider me for this position," and leave my name active on this list for future consideration. This response is listed at the bottom of the Canvas letter. We've included a blank copy of the standard Canvas letter in your handouts. You'll see a reference to the effects of acceptance and declinations on the back of that form. Now, also bear in mind that if you are invited in for an interview, going to said interview may provide you with the information that you need to decide if you're interested in the position. So, based on the information that we just discussed, we have a question for you. If you're on the eligible list for a transportation analyst position and you're appointed to this title, do you stay on the associated eligible list?
I just noticed that I've opened the Slido panel, which you can find on the right-hand side of the screen. Using your mouse, click on the option A for yes or B for no. And then when you're done, click on Send. Okay, we have 6 votes in. I'll give it a few more seconds. We have yes in the chat. We're 50-50 split on the Slido. I'll give 5 more seconds for the deciding vote. And the majority have spoken, and they are saying A, yes, 53%.
Well, think of it like you're in a line. You're in a line to get somewhere, right? And when you get the associated service or something, you get out of line. That's kind of, at least that's conceptually how I like to explain it. The answer is no, because your spot in line was used. So if you're hired from the eligible list, your name is inactivated for that title. So the answer is actually no, because you use the list to get hired and such. So now we're kind of making way in line for the next people, so to speak. So again, we can talk more about this towards the end of the presentation. Now, if you decline a position, but you want to be considered for future opportunities, or if you'd like to change your preferences or status on the list, there's actually a couple of ways you could do that. So the first way you can make these changes is by completing the form S211. So just S211, not S211.1. So we've included a link to this form on your screen. Again, I really want to reiterate, this is not the same thing as form S211.1. Just want to be clear about that. Now, thankfully, which is much less confusing, some changes like updating your preferences and inactivating your name or removing a declination can simply be done by visiting ELMS online. Now, reactivating your name on a list does require a written request, so be sure to include the exam number, last 4 digits of your Social Security number, and your signature. Call employment records first to see if your request can actually be handled by email, because you want to keep in mind if the list is expired or if there's any other circumstance, you may not be granted this request to be reactivated on the list. Also bear in mind that for any lists managed by the hiring agency, you're going to actually talk to the agency directly. So refer to the exam announcement to identify the hiring agency and their contact information. Now finally, when making changes to your name, address, phone number off of a list, remember that it's simply not enough to make the update and changes with your own agency. So you know how if your address changes or something, you want to update agency, HR, all that jazz, they'll make those changes internally, but they're not going to make those changes within civil service. You're going to want to hop on ELMS online or contact employment records to make those changes within civil service. So if you're wondering, how long does my name stay on a list? Generally speaking, eligible lists last between 1 and 4 years. However, a list can be extended and stay active up to 8 years. You're not going to be notified when a list expires, even if it happens before the 4 years due to the establishment of some new list. This is why signing up for email notification of exams is important. It's important to be aware that if you're not appointed off the eligible list for a particular title and the list expires, your score does not just get moved over onto the new list. You're going to have to apply and take the exam again. Okay, so we've discussed eligible lists and how they're used. So let's take a look at ELMS Online. As we mentioned earlier, ELMS stands for the Eligible List Management System, and it can be found on the Department of Civil Service website. ELMS Online was created several years ago so that employees could view eligible lists managed by civil service. Now, ELMS is a great resource to see the status of the eligible lists, when they're set to expire, how they're used, and their overall size and hiring activity. So just a general quick question for anyone. Have we used ELMS Online? Has anybody here actually gone on to ELMS Online and logged on?
Go ahead and click on the raise hand button if you have. And I see we have a yes in the chat, a no in the chat. Let me look. I see there's a few hands up in the air. So it looks like we have a few folks who have used ELMS Online.
Quickly backpedaling for 2 seconds, Ms. Garcia, I will address this question towards the end of the presentation. Just keep it in your head and ask it again towards the end of the presentation, okay? Just wanted to make note of that. Okay, so yes, a couple of yeses and nos. Definitely recommend that anybody who said no, highly recommend you go and take a look at it. Highly recommend. Highly, highly recommend. Because this is going to be a great resource for you. Because remember, I said earlier, you can update your contact information, preference information, remove declinations, or if you're just not interested in the title at all, you can inactivate your name on an eligible list on ELMS Online. So to access these options, I do want to quickly make mention, you will have to create a personal my.gov account. You can't use your work ny.gov account if you have one for this purpose. You can create a personal ny.gov account, and if you don't already have one, we have a handout that shows you how to do this. And if you have any problems at all, you can contact ITS using the email address at the bottom of your screen. So fixit@its.ny.gov if you have any issues creating a personal ny.gov account. So it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to look at it. So let's take a quick field trip over to ELMS Online. I know we're a little pressed for time, so I'm going to try to condense this. I do ask people pay attention. We're going to try to do this, make this field trip quick, just so you can see the general concepts of ELMS Online. So you'll notice that Eddie's moved right over to the ELMS website. So we were discussing the Office Assistant 2 exam announcement, so I'm going to go ahead and use that as the example for the eligible list. So we're going to click on the button that says By Job Title. That's probably the easiest way to find an exam, since we know the title name. If you knew the name of the eligible list, if it has a separate name like Beginning Office Assistant for Office Assistant 1 and those other parenthetic titles, then you would click on By List Name. But for this one, we're going to do By Job Title. Now, since the eligible lists are alphabetical due to these titles, we will then click on O to get to the Office Assistant 2 area. So you click it and your screen rapidly scrolls down to the O titles. So let's go ahead and click on Office Assistant 2. You can see Eddie has it right there in the middle of the screen. So he's going to click on that hyperlink. Now when he clicks on that, it's going to show all of the lists that fill the title. So we can see 38687, that's for Office Assistant 2. And let's go ahead and click on that, Eddie. When we click on that, this shows the entire promotion eligible list. You can see at the top the start date of when the list was established. See that right there, Eddie? Start date February 22nd, 2023. And then at this point in time, we can see that the end date, so this exam list is set to expire in February 22nd of 2027. Now remember that the end date for a list is not set in stone. So most lists are good for 4 years, but they may expire earlier if a new test is offered. So right above this bar of information, you're going to notice a hyperlink that says titles filled by this list on the left-hand side. So if we click on this, we can see that the only title that's filled with this list is Office Assistant 2. Right? Very simple. So let's go back to the previous page. You can hit the back button, Eddie. So when we look at the previous page at the top, we right now are looking at the entire eligible list. But you can also view the list based on the department or promotion units. This drop box right here, see, Eddie, where it says View Eligible Lists, we can see a number of different agencies. We talked about the state comptroller a couple times, so why don't we go ahead and pull up the state comptroller. It's going to be right at the top, Eddie. And when we click on Apply Filter, you can see this agency's department promotion list actually includes 33 eligibles on it. Now, as we said in the past, the agency has to consider this list of employees first. So, with that being said, you could see a candidate's eligibility date, appointment date, and their status on the eligible list. So I can actually, there's one person that I can see right here that's a great example. If you see Kimberly at the middle of this list who has an 85, you'll notice that when the list was established, they actually weren't eligible to be appointed yet. You can tell because an eligibility date was established. So they were going to be eligible on December 9th, 2022, is that right? I think I see that correctly. And then from there, we can see that they were actually appointed shortly after April of the next year. And then when you look at the far right, it's going to reflect that. It's going to say this person was appointed. So, if you have any questions about the eligibility date and such, you can definitely reach out to employment records within the Department of Civil Service or your agency's Human Resource Office to discuss your eligibility. And now, while we're here, there's some important information that I want to give you regarding ELMS Online. The eligible list here in ELMS, actually take me back to the main page, Eddie, if you don't mind, to make this point kind of most salient. You could just click on View an Agency List and then just go back to the full list, the entire eligible list. Thank you. Remember that when you look at a list like this isn't a certification of the list, meaning it's not an official listing of the candidates that an agency can use. When an agency has a vacancy that they want to fill through the eligible list, the agency has to order that specialized list from civil service based on the specifics of the position that they put forward. So, when you think about this, the certification of the list is not visible onto ELMS Online. It's just a snapshot of all eligibles, and the agencies cannot use ELMS Online here, this version, to canvass candidates. So you may see appointments at different grades and such. Also, another thing to think about is that ELMS here, this ELMS Online, is showing a statewide list. A list that an agency orders from civil service for a position in Buffalo may have a different top candidate list than a list that they order to fill a position in Albany. This is why you might see somebody who's appointed at the score of 80 when there are other candidates at the score of 100 who have not been appointed. Also, ELMS does not show who has been canvassed and who has declined, because if a candidate declines, the agency is going to be allowed to continue to canvass the list at the lower scores potentially. So you can go ahead and take us back to the slideshow now, Eddie. So ELMS, wonderful informational resource. On your screen, we've provided you with some more useful links that can assist you with your understanding of the civil service examination process and eligible lists. In addition, we've provided you a listing of the links that we have used throughout the webinar. This listing is included in your handouts as well. So definitely want to make sure you guys have all the information you need. Also, give you a brief, couple of minutes here, minute or two. If you have any questions, you want to contact us, here's how you can do that. So you can reach out to the Career Mobility Office via email or via phone. You can also mail in to us, but I imagine most people will optimally want to, email or call us for a more quicker answer, or for an answer more quickly, I guess I should say. I believe is this in their handouts as well? I believe the CMO information is in their handouts.
Correct. And what I'll do is, once we get to the Q&A session, which is we're at that point now, I will go back to that screen so anyone can go ahead and type in or write down the information. But Matt, I see we are at the end of today's webinar. I just want to say thank you so much for a fantastic webinar. Very, very informative. We have left time for those who have questions. You can stay and ask your questions because I do see a bunch of questions popping up on the chat.
I missed the chat. Are there a bunch of questions?
Yeah, no worries. For those who do not have any questions, you are free to leave. I know this ends at 11. I don't want to hold anyone back any further. So for those of you who do not have any questions, you're free to leave. There is an evaluation at the end. We please ask that you fill it out because we do review it and use it to enhance our webinars. So please take the time to fill out the webinar evaluation at the end. Now, Matt, how about we go through some of these questions, all right? So I'll go ahead and I'll scroll to the top. I know there was one question which I think you answered at the previous screen. Lucelenia asked, if multiple persons receive the same score on the exam, then how it is determined who is given priority for the position? And,
that's an interesting question. And Ms. Garcia, make sure to correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming that the concept of this is using the rule of 3. So if there's 10 people at the score of 100, how is it determined who is given priority for the position in that concept? Is that correct? I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. Okay. So the answer to that is
he says yes.
No priority. So it's not that there's no priority at all, because obviously the people at 100, will come before the people at 90 with the rule of 3. But let me give you like a fake example. Let me give you a fake example, or sort of just like a conceptual idea. Let's say that myself, Eddie, and a couple of other people are at the score of 100, and you're at the score of 90. And at that 90 score band, there's a large plethora of people at the score of 90 or 95, let's say. So me and Eddie, Eddie and I, we don't want to take that job. Right, we don't want to take that job. We decline. So because of our declination, somehow, some way, they only have 2 people interested at the 100 score band after everything's been said and done. The moment they have only 2 people available at the 100 score band, the rule of 3 cannot be utilized. It's like, oh, wait, or the rule of 3 was unsuccessful, I guess I should say. That's a better way of putting it. And so, okay, we're at the score of 100. We couldn't find 3 people. All right, well, we need to get a third person now. So, okay, now I'm going to open up the 90s, or 95s or 90s, however the score bands are utilized for an exam. It's usually 95, so let's say 95s. Now, anybody at the 95 score band can be brought in for an interview and potentially selected. So it opens up the whole score band that's available with the rule of 3. It's a little confusing, but basically think about it this way. We're at 100. Do we have 3 people? No, we don't have 3 people. Okay, we move down to the next score band. If with 195, do we have 3 people? Yes. Okay, we got to choose one of these 3 people that said that they're interested, right? Or one of the many people. Oh, we don't have 3 people in 195. Okay, now we got to go down and we got to include those people on the 90 score band. So it's really just maintaining that 3 people, right? All right. So it's think of it as who's eligible to be appointed, not necessarily who has priority and such. So an agency could choose any one of those 3, so to speak. Okay, I'm trying to do the questions in order. So we got.
Okay, the next question we have is from Adero. What if you took an exam and then take a position from that list, but you still get canvases after? What should you do? Inactivate or no appointment from list?
If you took an exam and then you take a position from that list, so you're appointed off of that list, but then you still get canvases after, what should you do? Inactivate or no appointment from the list? So that does depend on the list. So if you're talking something like the professional career opportunities where you can accept an appointment from one title, but then if you're on a select list, you may receive canvases from another one of those select lists, I would actually reach out to the career mobility office and just give them a little bit more specific information to your situation. It may be, so there's basically one of 2 answers. Either one is the one that I just gave you with a list like the PCO and such, or 2, it could be that they did appoint you, and then the appointment just hasn't been fully registered into ELMS Online yet, so they haven't taken your spot out of that line yet, but you really, should be taken out of the line depending on the list. I can't really get into specifics here during the meeting, so go ahead and email cmo@cs.ny.gov, okay?
I'm gonna pick 2 more questions, and then we're gonna have to wrap up.
Okay.
Let's see. What if a new exam is given, but the old eligible list is good until a certain date? Would they use the current eligible list or wait for the new eligible list?
This is a good question, Ms. Garcia. So if a new exam is given, the old eligible list, let's actually use the term new list and old list. So there's an old list out, and then a new list comes out. When a new list comes out, not generally speaking, I mean, there's some wiggle room, but it's really a 30-day time frame. So if a new list comes out, the agency has 30 days to wrap up whatever recruitments they were doing with the old list, and then they have to start using the new list. Now, there's a teensy bit of wiggle room, like if an agency is doing, like, say, a massive recruitment off of a list or something, like they finally were able to reach, like, the 70 score band or something, or, something of that, like, civil service, can maybe wiggle a little bit of, a couple weeks or so. But once a new list is established, the precedent is that the new list must be used. So they have, historically, the amount of time has been 30 days to, you got to use it or you lose it, basically, that old list stuff. And then they have to use the new list for their future recruitments. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me. All right, the final question, and then we have to wrap up.
I want to do 2 more, just because Ms. Garcia got 2 questions answered. So I want to hit Tammy and Amy Lee, if that's okay. I'll try to be as quick as I can.
Tammy, are the scores based on percent correct? If so, how can someone get 110%?
Tammy, if you're referring to an open competitive list, that would be veterans credits. So some people who are veterans are allowed additional credits due to their service. And I can't really get too in the details on that because I don't remember off the top of my head which veteran status gives however many points. It's like if you're a non-disabled veteran, I think it's 5, and if you're a disabled veteran, it might be 10. Don't quote me on that. Try to find a resource on the Civil Service website or reach out to CMO. But that would be an instance where people would get a 110 or a 105 or something of that like. If it's a promotional exam, there are also seniority credits that are sometimes applied. So some people might get a 100, and then due to their service with the state, they have enough to bump them up into 105 or something of that like, or something of that nature. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, yes. And then I'll let you pick the final question, Matt.
Okay. Oh, okay. Actually, I could kind of take Amy's and Gabrielle's. I hope I'm saying your names correctly. I can actually kind of hit these both at the same time. So Gabrielle asked, when is the Professional Career Opportunities Test coming out? And Amy said, how often are exams given? Well, the answer technically to both of those questions are they're based on recruitment need. So the PCO, because it fills a wide plethora of titles, usually is given anywhere from every 2 to 4 years. They try to run that on a pretty regular exam cycle. And now it's been made an online exam where you fill out a questionnaire based on your training and experience. So given that that's online, hopefully we're going to be able to put that out closer to a 2-year cycle. But it's based on agency need. Please, sign up for email notifications. And Amy, yours is kind of a more wider reaching question. How often are exams given? Again, that's really based on, recruitment needs and the space that we have in our civil service testing sites. So you're really, again, you're going to want to sign up for that email notification and check those emails. Me, as a civil service employee, take it direct from my mouth, talking both as professional Matthew Garapi at Civil Service and also personal Matthew Garapi as a fellow civil servant looking for a job. Email notifications is amazing because the amount of times I've had people call up my office and say, I'm looking for the promotion. I literally go to the promotion exam field list on our civil service website, and I find their promotion exam or another promotion exam or transition exam that they qualify for. It's like, please sign up for email notifications. You would see these, and then you can click on them and check them out. So please, both of you, Gabrielle and Amy, and really everybody on the training, sign up for email notifications so you can see when those new exams come out, okay?
All right, everyone. Thank you so much.